to the ashes of the Imperium.
Hello and welcome to Ashes of the Imperium. My name is Dan, and as ever, I'm joined by the wonderful Max. And today we are rising from the ashes of the Imperium. In fact, no less. We are rising from the ashes of the Imperium to take back what it is and prepare for the invasion of the Star Children. Yes, that's right. We are talking all about the Genestealer Cults. So this weekend sees the pre-order of 2 codexes or codices. Which one do you reckon, Max?
I always go with codexes, to be honest. It's probably not right, but it sounds better in my head.
It does. It's anglicized, isn't it? It is. I suppose both are technically correct because codices is Latin, and that is the correct Latin word. But we don't speak Latin; we speak English, and so it's also fine.
You're the classics guy here. I don't know.
In the same way that it's okay to say forums, and you don't have to say fora. But
okay, good to know.
Anyway, that's today's Latin lesson over. And now moving swiftly on to our next lesson, which is Genestealer Cults. So today sees the pre-release of 2 codexes. We've got Genestealer Cults and the Adeptus Sororitas, otherwise known as the Sisters of Battle. And Max and I only had time for one, and we picked our favourite. So it was a close call, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Sisters have always been an army that's intrigued me. I think they've got some really fun rules, some really cool mechanics, but I have had a Genestealer Cult army in the past. I have enjoyed playing them before, and yeah, I just wanted to see how they're looking in 10th edition, because they can be a tricky army to play, and I wanted to see what the rules are kind of shaking out like this time around.
Shake it out. Right, so we want to talk all about what the Codex sort of offers us in terms of rules, but first of all, as ever, we're going to start with a narrative, and much like every single other Codex in 10th edition, we're presented with a double pager, our little double page narrative stories that we like to dissect. What did you think of this little double pager?
Ooh, so first of all, I was sad there was only one, and I'll tell you what I liked about it, because the Casakin are pretty badass, right?
They are sort of stormtroopers of the Astra
Yeah, exactly. The elite, the elite of the Cadians, and the Cadians are pretty elite in their own right, and the description of this kill team, this squad moving through the catacombs, like the guy's not scared, right? They're professionals, they're doing their job, they've got all their kit, they've got all their technology, they're moving through, they're picking off the cultists one by one, doing a really good job, and they get to this kind of central chamber, and what do you reckon? Do you think this is where the Patriarch is situated? And they just get completely overwhelmed, don't they? And like, the further they go into these catacombs, this sort of creeping sense of dread. So it's not from the point of view of the protagonists of the book, it's not from the point of view of a Genestealer Cult. But I think it gives a really good, if you've never heard of the Genestealer Cult before, it gives you a really good sense of what they're all about, I thought. What did you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So I'll start off by saying I wasn't a huge fan of this one.
No,
I think writing it from the point of view of the pure strain humans, if you will, I thought was interesting. Obviously, it allowed you to give the human perspective, and yeah, it brought out those sort of sinister undertones, the kind of underground vibe, and the kind of stealth and the deception and concealment, those kind of elements of the Force, which I think that was cool. I did think it was just kind of the Astra Militarum walked into the sewers, and as they got lower, it started getting darker, and then they got killed. I don't know. There wasn't
generic.
Yeah, a bit generic, and there wasn't sort of a twist or a kind of like clever element to it, and often in these little 2 pages that there is a little twist or a kind of a narrative seed to plug on. It was just the
a bit of an action scene, wasn't it?
Yeah, but like a kind of action scene from the 90s.
Yeah,
where it was kind of just like they got killed. That was the end.
That's interesting, because I think this is a bit of a problem with the lore of the army overall. I don't feel like they're ever the main characters, if you know what I mean. There's not many stories from their perspective, and in the way that there's been so many good stories about chaos that kind of make you like them. They show the reasons that they're acting like they are, and they're not just the bad guy. There's more to them. I think there's so much opportunity to delve into that for the Genestealer Cults. explore this whole element. And we'll get onto that later, but explore why they are like they are and how a Genestealer cultist thinks and how their belief works. And that's, unless I'm missing it, I can't think of a story where that's really been explored.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I feel like, Death Welder is a brilliant book.
Yes.
And that actually kind of does what you're talking about there. You really see that perspective. So that's a book by an author called Victoria Hayward, and it follows a kind of Catachan kill team who are trying to do a thing, complete the quest,
Get the MacGuffin,
get the MacGuffin, and set on the Death World that's kind of during a Tyranid invasion. So it's one of the most visceral, in-depth descriptions of the sort of planet death during a Tyranid invasion, but it also contains some Genestealer Cult characters that you can kind of sympathize with.
That's interesting.
The Imperium guys are like, oh, I can't believe you've risen up against the Imperium, and they're like, what, that Terra, that planet from light years away that we just have to like give up so much for, that is the kind of the oppressor, and that is the whole vibe of the Genestealer Cults, isn't it? They are the downtrodden masses, and I can kind of see what you mean, sort of sense that they blend into the background. I think the 40k universe is filled so much with these kind of the unwashed masses that they're kind of just like the generic baddies in the background, aren't they?
Yeah, they're never the main characters. Death Welder sounds really good. I've heard good things about it. It's new, isn't it? It's just come out.
It is, yeah. A couple of months ago.
I've got it downloaded. It's next on my list, but I'm working through the Siege of Terror at the moment, so I'll get round to it.
An excellent alternative.
Well, yeah, but that's interesting. So I think about things like the really good Vigilus campaign books, and the Genestealer Cults had a really big part to play at the start of that, but they just kind of get things going, and then other bigger, more important factions take over. And by their very nature, they're always going to be abused, aren't they? They're not, their goals and their desires are always false. That it's, a Genestealer Cult uprising is always a precursor to the Tyranids arriving. So by their kind of very nature, they're always going to be second fiddle, which I think is a bit of a shame.
Ever the bridesmaids.
Yes, but there is a lot of interesting space to tell the stories before Ascension Day, isn't there?
Yeah. I would have quite liked to have seen, the charisma of the cult leaders, especially like the first generation.
Yes.
Where you don't have this kind of deep-seated alien rot. You've just got all these humans who are just being, absolutely manipulated by the Patriarch, and there are the kind of mutants in the background. But like all the actual real life normal humans who are just recruited into the cult. Like, why are they recruited into the cult? What is their grievance? And I think oppression exists in so many different forms, and we see in the 41st millennium this kind of the mining, mining lasers and in industrial worlds. That's a very well-trodden path
for the Genestealer Cult.
For the Genestealer Cult, and to be honest, 40k got a background with small b in general. Whereas what does a Genestealer Cult look like on an agri world? Is it the farmers uprising against their kind of feudal overlords? I don't know. There's just so much to explore.
So I can remember you and Steve having some really good conversations about this, and in terms of what cultists might look like in different settings and the kind of hobby opportunities that would afford. And I think it's a really interesting. I mean, Genestealer Cult have got so much hobby potential, haven't they?
Oh, 100%.
I think I would put them up there with Orcs in terms of like kit bash potential and, the ability to really go wild with your conversions and stuff. I think there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah, we will. And do you know what? I've seen someone do it so well. And it's something like the something heretic cult. I can't honestly. Someone will have to comment on YouTube or put it on the Instagram post. It's something like, I think it's got like a swear word in there. So it's something like the effing cult or the effing heretic cult or something, something whatever. And just trying to keep it clean. And they've basically done the chaos. They've done chaos Genestealer Cults, Genestealer Cult models, but made to be a chaotic cult. So I think the hybrids were kind of spawny dudes instead of Genestealer dudes.
Interesting. We should talk about their lore.
We should.
In terms of
let's do it. Tell us
So-
about how cults start.
Okay. Well, interestingly, the Imperium encountered Genestealers before they knew that they were Tyranids, right? They encountered Genestealers as a organism before they knew about the whole Hive fleets and
I believe so,
Tyrant
and I believe that
Prime
was
and-
on the moon of Ymgar.
yeah. And the Genestealers are really, obviously, as the name would suggest, critical to how these cults come about and how they spread. So essentially what happens is the Genestealer is the vanguard organism of the Tyranid fleets. Yeah, stowaways on spacecraft or locked away in space hulks or, at numerous different ways that they can find themselves in a highly populated area. I get kind of real alien vibes when I think about Genestealers on the spaceship,
For sure. Very
And,
Geiger-esque.
Exactly. How would you feel about being kissed by a Genestealer, Dan?
I would not personally like it. Yeah, I'm a very open-minded man, but not sure I'd enjoy that.
No. So this is what's really insidious, because you think of Genestealers, you think of Space Hulk, you think of them tearing open ceramite, don't you, and like devouring and just like kill machines. But to start the Genestealer cult, what the Genestealer actually does is it deposits some genetic material using its ovipositor, which is a horrible word. I don't like saying it.
Ew.
And essentially what that does is it bewitches, it like charms the recipient, makes them view the Genestealer as this kind of angelic figure of, this great celestial entity
it
coming to...
It taps into whatever the societal culture offers. So
which is really clever, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of appears as what it's like the room of requirements. It appears as what it needs to appear to the population in order to convince it.
Mm-hmm. And then these first few people that are affected by this, they then kind of do its bidding to an extent, don't they? I don't think it's necessarily like the Genestealers giving them orders, but they feel compelled to grow the cult, don't they, and bring more people under its sway. And you end up with these human Genestealer hybrids, and the first kind of people affected, they don't really change in appearance, do they? So the very first people kind of still appear human. But then what I think is really cool is as the generations progress, you get different kind of appearances. So the first generation look quite alien, don't they? And then they kind of gradually become a bit more human to the third and the fourth generation. And you get different, in a very Tyranid way, you get different specialisms evolving and emerging with the generations. So a Magos will appear, who is this hyper charismatic, very psychic entity who can, rally the masses. You get Primuses, who are tactical geniuses. You get Nexuses, who do a similar role, with like specialist assassin types emerge and evolve. And what you end up with in the fifth generation is these human Genestealer hybrids give birth to pure strain Genestealers, don't they? And then the cycle repeats. And
it's very weird, isn't it? Because the first ones that come out are, these hideous monsters.
Like the Acolyte hybrid kids,
more
basically,
reminiscent
aren't they?
of a Genestealer than a human.
Yeah.
The second one are more sort of humanoid Genestealers, whereas I think like the first generation just like these horrendous Genestealer monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Between generation 1 and 2, you've got your Acolyte hybrid type things.
Yeah.
And then you've got the third generation, which is, as you say, kind of like they've got these forehead.
Yes.
What do you call it? Like carapace bits.
A bit like Klingons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or like maybe a third arm or something like that.
Yeah.
Ridges in their head, purple skin and all that jazz. And then by the fourth generation, they pretty much look pure human. And I love that it's kind of getting pure, more human and more human and more human. But then suddenly, bam, fifth generation, just Genestealer. just back to Genestealer.
It is really cool. It is really cool. And I love there's some really nice descriptions of the various generational traits and stuff in the book. I love because the Kelomorph was a fairly new edition. He only appeared towards the end of 8th edition, didn't he? And was it the Deathwatch Overkill box, which is where we started to get the new models back in 7th edition?
Yeah, I think so.
Wasn't
That's
it?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good memory.
Oh, there you go. So I like the Kellamorph. I like the description of him.
He's very cool.
He's like a gunslinging hero,
He is.
and he's evolved to play that role. Basically, he will seek out the opportunities to, be the vigilante against oppression and spread the rumors of this hero, and they have a real kind of
sense of the theatric.
Yes, yeah, which I really like. I really like.
I love it. When's the one that does the musicals coming out?
Well, actually, isn't the cultist in Deathworlder, isn't she a singer?
She is? Oh yeah, there we go. It's out. It's in the lore. Les Mis Genestealer Cult version. Love it. Yeah. I think the Kellamorph is probably one of my favorites of the kind of small heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new Saboteur is a really good kit as well. The Reductus Saboteur. I really like the release that came out with the 8th edition Codex, where we got the Jackals and the Sniper on the bike. Yeah, they got some fantastic models. Like
they've got some phenomenal models, and they've also got some models that you could just convert. Mm-hmm. So you've got the Kellamorph with 3 guns. He's like the cowboy one. They don't have to have 3 guns. You could just do like a gunslinger guy with 2 pistols.
Yeah, I did exactly that in 8th edition when I had my Genestealer Cult army. I had my Kellamorph, and then I used the Necromunda hired gun. What's his name? Cal Jericho?
Oh, yeah, Cal Jericho.
Yeah, I used Cal Jericho with a head swap.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing you can do.
Exactly. Yeah, used him as a Kellamorph, and it worked really well, actually.
So that's a really interesting one, and I think is a nice little segue onto how to represent the various, I suppose, like chapters. So you've got the various different cults, and we'll go through the kind of main ones. You've got the cult of the 4-armed Emperor, the Bladed Cog, the Hive Cult, the Rusted Claw, the Pauper Princes, and the Twisted Helix. Now, for me, there's some really interesting ways about how you can represent these on the tabletop. And as ever, like all these good Codex reviews, it's all about how to bring kind of cool hobby ideas onto the tabletop. It's not necessarily about how to run the best army. It's like how to run the coolest army for me personally. Yeah. So Cult of the 4-armed Emperor are your normal dudes.
They're the Ultramarines of
they are the
Genestealer Cult.
Of the Genestealer Cult. Absolutely. They are your kind of vanilla poster boys. So I think that's pretty much, you run the kits as they are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And their kind of theme is... through the kits is this kind of industrial mining kind of community on a sort of hive world or industrial world.
But because for a cult to grow, it obviously needs to remain hidden, doesn't it, for a period of time and grow very slowly. That's where the whole plan generations in the making comes from. So the reason that the kits represent miners so often is because, subterranean, underground, can remain hidden, downtrodden. It's kind of the shtick of how they can remain hidden and grow, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think in the previous codexes, I didn't see it in this one, but it's talked about how the Imperial overseers weren't too bothered about the fact that some of their workers were looking a bit hulky and broody and maybe had a third arm because they were really good workers.
Yeah, exactly. They worked so hard.
Yeah, they've got this weird disease. They look a bit funky, but they're working really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. A few mining lasers are going missing, but the quotas are up.
They're really good at being obedient, aren't they?
Yeah.
And working. Yeah, they're very good workers.
And then moving on to the Bladed Cog. So this is man, machine, and alien in glorious unity. So the cult of the Bladed Cog is born as much of metal as it is of raw human stock, and it is further augmented by the extragalactic anatomies of the Tyranids. This great blend of human, Xenos, and War Machine is a deadly threat to its Adeptus Mechanicus hosts. So there you go. Per the Bladed Cog kind of text, this is a great opportunity to kit bash with a load of AdMech kits.
Yes, this was one of my favourites, I think. And I was thinking, how could you make a really funky looking aberrant squad? Could you use some of the like breacher kits to do like tank tracked aberrants? And I think there's some really fun opportunities there for sure.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. The Cancerform breachers.
Yes, yeah. Those ones.
Yeah. And then you could do something like the Cerberus Riders instead of the
Atalan Jackals.
Atalan Jackals, absolutely. And they've even got, the Skitarii Rangers, they've even got a big sniper rifle that you could put on a Cerberus Rider to have your Jackal Primus.
Yeah. Loads of opportunity.
Loads of opportunity. So that's a good opportunity to do a bit of kickback, and that could just be anything from like Skitarii heads on Genestealer Cult bodies, or Genestealer Cult heads on Skitarii bodies. The world is yours.
The Skitarii kits work really well with the Genestealer kits. They're similarly proportioned, you know. So because I used a few bits and bobs in my Genestealer Cult Force that I had in 8th edition, and it's a really easy swap.
Yeah, and if you're using the Skitarii bodies with the cloaks and putting the Genestealer Cult weapons and heads on, that means you've then got a bunch of Genestealer Cult bodies to put the AdMech heads and weapons on, and then you could run a really unique looking different AdMech army.
Doubling your fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, next up, we've got the Hive Cult.
Yeah, these are a good one.
So the Hive Cult are militant, organised, and hierarchical. They infiltrate not only the criminal underworlds and hive gangs of their host planets, but also place special emphasis on subverting the Astra Militarum regiments that recruit from them. To the Hive Cult, it is a divine duty to be armed and dangerous. So if you want to make maximum use of the Astra Militarum kits, maybe that's the new Cadians, or even some of the like older kits, like some of the older metals, you can just run the Hive Cult and you can make it look whatever you want. You could have like a Genestealer Cult Mordians, Genestealer Cult Catachans.
Oh, that would work well. That's perfect, isn't it? GSC Catachans. The new Broodbrother kit's come out as well, hasn't it, with the kill team, and that looks really good.
Yes, that is very kind of Hive Culty, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, well, it's exactly what you need for it, isn't it? Yeah. And I like the origin of the Hive Cult as well. They came from this planet that had what was it, sort of 10 big fortress cities, and slowly but surely all these fortress cities fell to the cult until there was like one last holdout. And it's a very kind of, well, unsurprisingly grim setting for the cult to come from. They're a bit more overt, I think, than some of the other cults that are described in the book. They don't hide out quite as much. They kind of reach their critical mass, and then they're a bit more open with
much more
actions.
of a kind of armed insurrection rather than a kind of sinister, from within rebellion.
Yeah, less saboteur, more smash with tank.
Absolutely. But I suppose that fits with, if you've got a well-armed rebellion, you can be over with your kind of your cause. You can kind of seize power by force rather than by subversion. So the next two, I think, are kind of similar. You've got the Rusted Claw, when all else rots, the cult alone will survive. And you've got the Pauper Princes. From great sacrifice comes immortality. How would you differentiate these?
So I would say that the Rusted Claw are less about self-sacrifice, and more about nihilism. Like, they kind of accept that entropy is the way of the universe and nothing will last forever, and which I think is quite interesting when you consider what happens to them when the Tyranids come. Whereas the Pauper Princes, they are the kind of hyper-religious ones, I guess, if I had to sort of reduce them to a simple statement. And they are kind of characterized by martyrdom, aren't they? It was the martyrdom of their first Magos that kind of set them up to behave in the way that they do. And a really cool bit on the Rusted Claw, I think, is how some of their bioforms like secrete a machine degrading enzyme. So some of their more powerful Magos have just like touched tanks and they've withered in front of them, which I think is a really neat idea.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. I like that. So I think the reason I kind of look at this from a point of view that they're quite similar is because I think of, I suppose, like a religious monk kind of giving up all his earthly possessions, which kind of ties into that nihilism of the Rusted Claw. But you're right, it's not a religious thing. It's more of a mindset thing. I'm not sure how to describe it.
I think they're agnostic, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Pauper Princes are Star Child botherers. They're very religious, I think.
For sure. Have you got 5 minutes to talk about our Lord and Saviour, the Genestealer Cult? So I thought these ones would be best represented actually both by the Cawdor gang.
Oh, that's a really good shout. Yeah, I hadn't even put that together. That would work so well.
That would work really, really well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to do something different, then I think maybe Pauper Princes as Cawdor and Rusted Claw as the Ash Waste Nomads.
That's good, because they have a slightly more mechanical
ragtaggy kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
They're a bit more Mad Max, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Cawdor gang, they are the religious fanatics. I could have sworn there was a Cawdor redemptionist band as well.
Oh, there might have been. I'm not. You can use your Genestealer Cult in Necromunda as well, of course. They've got rules, haven't they, in Necromunda? But I'm not 100% up on all the Necromunda releases.
Oh yeah, I found it. Cawdor redemptionists. So they are the dudes with like fiery hats, and I think you could make some really cool characters out of the redemptionists if you're going with Cawdor models for your Rusted Claw or your Pauper Princes.
That's cool. So okay, if we were gonna do Cawdor for Pauper Princes and Ashwaste Nomads for the Rusted Claw, then Twisted Helix is the last one that's talked about in the book.
Yes.
What do you think? Would Goliath be a bit too on the nose for that, or?
I think Goliath could work. But I also think you could just revert back to the standard, models. But it's more about your army composition at that point. It's less about, you could, make all your cultists Goliaths to make them see that they'd, because the cultists of the Twisted Helix did not have the Genestealer Cults thrust upon them, but instead voluntarily took it into their society through extreme medical experimentation. They harbour unnumbered biohorrors amongst their ranks and take as their symbol a grotesque corruption of the hermetic symbol employed by Imperial Medici institutions, the kind of Twisted Helix snake things.
They rose up from a medical planet, didn't they? Like a medical manufactory, lots of biophaguses in them.
It's kind of 28 days later-y, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is, yeah. So I was thinking maybe you could like smatter a few Goliaths in amongst your like neophyte squads to represent a few who are like hulked out, but the really obvious one is Aberrants, isn't it? And go heavy on those.
I also think I'm going to go the opposite direction, and I think Delac could really work.
Oh, okay.
So I think you embrace the whole like white lab coats, evil, Indiana Jones German scientist kind of thing. You embrace that vibe and have your troops as the scientists and the lab techs, and then you have the normal aberrants and stuff like that as your kind of to build the army composition that way.
We've got so many kits now. I'm just thinking if you wanted to do like Hive Cult and make them less militaristic and more law enforcement, you've got the Arbites kits now, haven't you? You've got the Palatine Enforcers. There's so much potential to. You could do Hive Cults, but rather than in a terrestrial setting, they grew up in they rose up in like a big transport ship, like a big void ship, and
like a naval.
Yeah, and you could use some of the Navy breaches, couldn't you? And, oh my god,
that would be really cool. And so that's what I mean. There's just a really cool like opportunity from a converter. It is a converter's dream, I think. This army.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you know what? If you just went completely standard as well, it would also look amazing, because this model range, I think this model range is one of the best model ranges in 40k.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just having put a lot of them together, so many options. Like I must have built 60 neophytes in my 8th edition army, and it was so easy to give the squads differentiation, because a weapon swap here, glue that little dangly bit on, but don't do it on the next one. Very simple and very easy to really get some variety across the kits. Just using the stock kits, no additional kind of add-ons or extras.
For sure. And I think easy to paint as well. Yeah,
they go together pretty quick. They're very forgiving, because of course you can make them look very dirty and grimy. Really nice paint schemes as well. I went for the kind of classic orange hazard suit with the white shaded like hazard armor, and that's a really really neat scheme. You can go very kind of military with their look, and that doesn't look out of place. Like you can paint them up to look industrial, or you can paint them in greens and khakis, and that works really well. And there's a lot you can do with it.
I think what's really interesting is right at the back of the book, there's even a conversion guide for how to have your brood brothers, and we'll get onto that, but it effectively allows you to take Astra Militarum units in your list. I just love that. I just love that it's almost like a kind of like a White Dwarf hobby article on one page.
Feels like a throwback, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the first time I've seen that in the Codex, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also this first time we've had a Codex that allows you to take custom units from another Codex in it.
Yeah.
I think. And the best thing is, like, or not the best thing, but a good thing. How's that for hyperbole? So a good thing about this is when the Astra Militarum book comes out, you'll have been playing your Genestealer Cults for ages, and then bam, suddenly you've got like kind of a new army because you've got a whole new codex to explore, and all the new, there's a bunch of new units that come out for Astra Militarum. You can suddenly include those in your army.
Ah, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
So it's a very versatile army as well.
Yeah, and you used to be able to take Tyranids with them. I don't think that's the case anymore.
That was my next point as well. That is a shame, but I think that does.
I think it makes sense narratively.
I think it does. I don't think you see kind of Tyranids and Cultists like fighting together.
No.
When you do with
when the Tyranids show up, the Cultists have had it. They're not
just food at that point, aren't they?
Exactly. They're not helping each other. All I would expect to see in a GSC army is a Patriarch and some Genestealers, because those are the organisms that they interact with and worship, and do
you know what? I would accept a Lictor as well.
Okay, yeah,
I think a Lictor would be cool, but maybe with some like a special, like a kind of a cult Lictor or something.
It would fit the Vanguard theme, wouldn't it?
It would, wouldn't it? And it would allow you could have like a special rule that said like if this model is within 12 inches of a Genestealer Cult model, then they suffer D3 mortal wounds on a 1 or something.
Mm-hmm.
To represent them being like just these feral beasts that are just munching them. So yeah, overall, cool lore, interesting background, interesting kind of story, and like you say, never necessarily the protagonists of a book or a story, which I think is perhaps a slightly missed opportunity. But always a cool force to see on the table and bring to the table.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd like to see more of them. They're not as popular as I think they deserve to be. We were talking about this, weren't we, before we started recording? And I think part of the issue is we've talked about all the amazing hobby opportunities that there are, but I think a lot of people are kind of put off by that as well. It's quite a big hobby commitment to build a Genestealer Cult army. There's a lot of figures to paint. You can't slap. Well, you could, couldn't you, if you wanted to go Hive Cult and Astra Militarum, slap down a load of tanks.
Well, interestingly, I think that things like your other large forces, like kind of Chaos Horde or Orcs or Tyranids, there's a lot of, or even something smaller, like that's got a lot of smaller models, like Tau.
Mm.
Out of all those armies, Tau are the newest.
Yeah,
and they've been out for years and years and years. So I think people have a lot of these models, or it's easy to get a lot of these models. You can pick up like the old, like Assault on Black Reach Orcs brings a lot of push fit Orcs to the table. But for something like Genestealer Cult, you've just got to buy lots of kits of 10, and there weren't many. I think they've had like a couple of battle boxes in the past, but there haven't been a lot of kind of starter boxes with them in.
No.
There's not like a proliferation of Genestealer Cult models out there. Maybe that's a thing as well.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. But it'd be great to see more of them.
Right. Talking of great to see more of them, how would you represent them on the tabletop in terms of rules? That's a very good question, and I've segued myself nicely into the rules. Well done, me. So, army rules. Talk to us about the Cult Ambush rule, Max, and tell us specifically about how it's changed from the index.
Okay, it's a very long rule, so
please summarize it.
Bear with me. Right. If your army faction is Genestealer Cults, each time a unit with this ability is destroyed, roll a d6, adding 1 to the result if it is the first or second battle round. On a 5-up, add a new unit to your army identical to the destroyed one, put them into Cult Ambush at its starting strength. It has all its wounds remaining, and any one-shot weapons that they are equipped with are replenished, effectively. So in turns 1 and 2, if your unit is destroyed, roll a 4-up, and they come right back into reserve. In battle rounds 3, 4, and 5, it's a 5-up, and they get put into reserve. While a unit is in Cult Ambush, you put Cult Ambush marker anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away horizontally from enemy units. If it isn't possible, then it can't be placed. If an enemy model ends any kind of move, excluding aircraft, within 9 inches of that marker that you've just put down, it's removed from the battlefield. At the end of the reinforcement step of your opponent's next movement phase, for each ambush marker that's on the battlefield, you can select one of your units that's in Cult Ambush in reserve and put it into the battle using that Cult Ambush marker. They have to be more than 9 inches horizontally away from enemy units. At least one model in that unit has to be touching the marker, and all other models must be placed wholly within 3 of that cult ambush marker. And then it is removed from the battlefield. See what I mean about a long rule?
For sure. That doesn't sound like a summary. That sounds like the whole rule. So, to summarize, listeners who have probably just kind of got halfway through that and be like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Basically, when your stuff gets killed, you roll a dice. On a 5 up, and you get to +1 if it's the first or second battle round. On a 5 up, you get to put a counter down, and at the end of your opponent's following movement phase, you can put one of your units that you've rolled a 5 up for on that counter.
Mm-hmm.
And if the opponent moves next to the counter disappears and you can't use it.
Yeah, you've got to wait a little while.
You've got to wait a small while. Doesn't happen immediately. But yeah, I think that's basically your dudes die on a 5 up. You can bring them back on the table if your opponent doesn't move to where your counter is.
It's to represent the hidden hordes like emerging and coming back.
Yeah, I like it. It's cool.
It used to be a lot more powerful. A battle line used to come back automatically, basically. This was when, 10th edition index dropped. And it was very powerful because you could just fill your army up with battle line and you just have this never-ending horde. So they've made it a bit harder to bring stuff back, which I think is fair enough.
I think if you're conservative with your counter placement, you can make it work.
Yeah.
Like if you play aggressive, your counter's going to get snapped up.
Yeah, especially by really mobile forces.
Yeah, or if your enemy's got units of deep strike and they can just drop them down and zap your counters, then so be it.
Grey Knights are horrible for Genestealer Cult because they can just zip around all over the place. But if you are playing conservatively, then there is the risk of your units being a bit out of position, isn't there? Do you really want to drop your aberrants or your acolyte hybrids in your deployment zone? I don't know. It's interesting. It's tricksy.
And I think it rewards clever play.
Yeah, they're a very cerebral army. They always have been.
Big brains. Like physically, their brains are like exploding out their heads. Now, tell us about these detachments, Max. Are there any that caught your eye?
Yeah. I went for the one that kind of drew me was the Biosantic Broodsurge.
The Gym Bros.
Yeah, basically. I think if we were to... All of the detachments can be mapped quite easily to some of those cults that we talked about, can't they? There's a very obvious representation of the existing cults within the detachments that are presented to us in the book.
For sure. So Host of Ascension is the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor.
Yeah.
The Xenocreed Congregation is your Pauper Princes.
Yeah.
Biosantic Broodsurge is your Twisted Helix.
Uh-huh.
Outlander Claw, bit of a
Rusted Claw, maybe,
maybe.
slash
Bladed Cog.
The Bladed Cog ones, yeah.
Brood Brother Auxilia is definitely Hive Cult.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, Biosantic Broodsurge is your kind of Twisted Helix one, like you said. Their detachment rule that they get is adding +1 to charge rolls, made for aberrants, biophagus, and pure strain Genestealer units from your army. In addition, each time a unit is selected to fight, if it made a charge move this turn, you can add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons equipped by models in that unit. So 10-man blobs of Genestealers chucking out 50 attacks is pretty beefy. Big squads of aberrants, big 10-man squads of aberrants chucking out loads of attacks is really good too. Obviously, it's very prescriptive in terms of the units that is benefiting. That's only 3 named data sheets. And of course, the Abominant, if you wanted to put him with aberrants, would benefit from those as well because he would be attached to the unit.
And that's a bit of a theme for the detachments, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. The Ascension Day 1 is a bit more generic. It's anybody who arrives, they get lethal and sustained, don't they? Or lethal or sustained. So that one applies to a slightly wider range of unit. The Rusted Claw 1 is very kind of bike focused, vehicle focused, bike focused. I should get the names really, shouldn't I?
The Outlander Claw is the bike one.
Yes, the Outlander Claw. The Host of Ascension is the one that I was talking about that has the kind of
more generic.
Yeah, exactly. Sustained hits 1 and ignores cover when you arrive. Xenocreed Congregation really benefits hybrids, acolyte hybrids, hybrid metamorphs, neophyte hybrids. They're very dialed in on where the buffs are coming from. And we were having a bit of a chat about this before And you quite like that, don't you?
Yeah,
as a feature
but
of the detachments.
I'm a sucker for a theme.
Yeah.
And I like quite refined detachments, things that kind of not force you, but reward heavily themed lists.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas something that's like, oh, this is the Iron Warriors detachment, and everything gets +1 armor save or -1 to wound or whatever it is. It's kind of like, okay, cool. Well, so it's not just the tanks that get better; it's everything is a bit stronger.
Yeah. So I think you could look at that from two sides. When the rules are very prescriptive, like we can see in this book, that's obviously pushing you towards a theme. We'll talk about the list I've written for this detachment in a bit. And it's obviously to make the most of the rules, it's very themed around those units that benefit. Whereas take a detachment like the Black Legion detachment in the Chaos Space Marine book, that just gives a buff to lots and lots of different units. That's not stopping me theming my force necessarily. In fact, if anything, it gives me a bit more flexibility to do themes and run that detachment, because I could do a very infantry focused list built around legionaries. I could do a fast attack list built around raptors and warp talons and chaos bikers, and they're all still benefiting from those rules. Or I could do a very vehicle themed list and they're still going to benefit from those rules. So I don't know. I felt very pigeonholed by the detachments in this book.
Okay, that's interesting. I think when I talk about my detachment, I didn't feel pigeonholed, but that's because of the detachment. So tell us what you built with your detachment.
Yeah, okay. So this is what I mean. I found it hard to go beyond the constraints. So I've maxed out on aberrants. I've got 30 aberrants in the list. So that's almost half the list. That's 900 points. I've got 3 squads of pure strain Genestealers. Again, maxing out on those. And then 3 abominants. So an abominant in each aberrant squad. Because, oh god, their data sheet's so fun. Let me read you the power sledgehammer. It is 4 attacks, weapon skill 3+, strength 12, -2, d6 +1 damage. I love that on a melee weapon. D6 on a melee weapon is really good fun. And combine that with some of the stratagems in this detachment as well. There's a +1 to wound in melee stratagem you can pop. So all of your kind of gribblies, once they're up close and personal, they have the opportunity to wound the toughest of vehicles and things with some of the stratagems in here. And then I've also got a Patriarch, because of course.
Naturally.
Yeah. And then I had a few points left over. So I've done a squad of 20 neophytes with a Primus leading them. They're still a really strong unit, because you can load them up with special weapons. The seismic cannon's got a really good data profile. And when they drop in with the Primus, he gives them reroll hits. So even with, relatively kind of low strength weaponry, you're pumping out a lot of shots and getting a lot of hits. So there's a lot of opportunities to get those wounds through. So just a nice kind of utility unit to drop in.
What do you think on neophyte hybrids in 10s or 20s?
20s obviously maxes out the benefit of the character, because you're getting that reroll to hit on a greater number of units. You can also kind of concentrate the firepower a little bit more effectively, possibly. But also very big footprint, maybe harder to bring in. I don't know, I think there's benefits to running MSU as well, for objective control and scoring secondaries. I don't know, where would you land on it?
They're fragile.
Yeah, very, but they come back potentially.
Yeah, and I think MSU is the way forward because of that.
Yeah,
you're basically, why would you take 20 models when you could and have 1 chance of bringing them back, when you could take 20 models in 2 units and 10 and have 2 chances of the roll? Because it's a 5 up.
Yeah, they're not going to kill much. I think use them as a utility unit in MSU. Okay, that'd be an easy swap. But I think
other things, your pure strains or your
they're my hammers.
Acolyte hybrids rather than your neophyte hybrids are the ones doing the real work.
Yeah, but with the aberrants and the Genestealers, I think I'd want to take those in max units, right?
Sure.
Because that's where I want to concentrate the buffs of the detachment. Then to round us out, we've got 10 acolytes with hand flamers, and they are the ones that can take the demolition charges as well. So interesting, the Acolyte hybrids have been split into 2 separate data sheets now. So we've got Acolyte hybrids with pistols, and they are slightly better in melee. They can take the special melee weapons, the heavy, cutters and those kind of things. And then we've got the Acolyte hybrids with hand flamers, separate data sheet, slightly more expensive in points in the back, but we can never trust for Codex points 100% until we get the updates. And they are the ones that can take the demo charges. Demo charges used to be horrific. They've got a bit of a nerf. So they used to be D6 attacks +3, and they were also blast. So you had 2 people with demo charges in your squad. You'd bring them in. They would then be doing 2d6 +6 with blast hits. And they used to be strength 12. They're now only strength 9. The same AP, and I think the same damage. I think they're still damage 2. So the demolition charges have been made slightly weaker, but they're still a really good unit and can still come in. That's still a really good kind of elite infantry killer. I think strength 9, AP 2 damage. That will do some work on marine units and that kind of stuff. So drop them in as a kind of final option, and of course they come back on the Cult Ambush if you roll your 5. And then you can do the demolition charges again because they're a one-shot weapon, and they replenish when they come back from Cult Ambush.
I think it's also worth pointing out that not every single model or every unit has the Cult Ambush faction rule.
Yes, that's true.
So
that
things like the characters don't.
Yeah. You can't bring back
units.
characters. Yeah. When if you have a character attached to a unit and the unit's destroyed, you don't bring the character back. No, that's right. They can't come back.
And the vehicles as well.
Yeah. That would be tough.
That would be insane. Insane.
Yeah. So yeah, do you see what I mean? I felt a bit pigeonholed by the constraints of a detachment. I mean, I still think you could have a good time with that list, but because the benefits of a detachment are only for aberrants and genestealers, I kind of felt like I had to take 30 of each, because why wouldn't I? What do you reckon? Was I blinded by
your faith in the Star Children, Max? As you should be. No, I think it pushes these detachments push you towards a more specific play style and a more specific army composition, I think, than perhaps other detachments that we've seen. But I think that's okay. If you wanted, you can still take aberrants in a Host of Ascension.
Of course you can. Yeah, of course you can. And they'll still be really good.
And they're still good.
Yeah.
If you wanted to take loads of aberrants, then the Biosantic Broodsurge is the one to go for. I've taken 10 aberrants in my list because they're cool.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And, you are talking to a man who is building a 2,000 point Kroot army right now, right? So I'm obviously not against very specific detachments. There's some good strats in here as well, and this is quite common to the detachments as well. It seems like every one or most of them have a stratagem that allows you to do a bit of Cult Ambush marker shenaniganery, which is
Say that word
fun.
again.
Shenaniganery.
Shenaniganery. Oh,
Yeah.
What an interesting word you just made up.
So there's one called Evasive Vanguard. It targets your Pure Strain Genestealers unit that's in Cult Ambush. So for this to work, you already have to have had a Genestealer unit destroyed, and it has to have successfully rolled to be in Cult Ambush. So it's quite situational, but still fun. Then when an enemy unit moves within range of your Cult Ambush marker, you can move it 6 inches. So kind of take it out of being destroyed range. And then only the Genestealers can pop up from that ambush marker. So if you've got one in a really clutch place and you don't want it gone, your enemy moves to destroy it, remove it, they move within 9, just shunt it back a little bit so that it's still there, drop in your Genestealers, and then nom nom nom, they get there. They would still benefit with their +1 to charge, so you got an 8 rather than a 9-inch charge. They make that charge, they're getting their extra attacks as well, which is really nice. And we've seen that in a few of these detachments now, that there are move the ambush marker for a specific unit type stuff, which I think is good. I think I like that kind of play.
So yeah, so there's an interesting one in the Outlander Claw that does something similar with your Jackals. It allows you to basically stick it on within 6 inches of a board edge instead. and then you can only bring jackals on from that marker, which is cool.
Along shadowed trails. Yeah, that's
Along
good.
shadowed trails. And then the Brood Brother Auxilia, which I'm going to do, is in the Shadow of Iron. So you can set up the cult ambush marker anywhere within the battle that's within 9 inches away from enemy units and 6 inches of a Astra Militarum vehicle, which is cool. Like it represents them kind of like, I don't know, like disembarking from the tank or hiding behind a tank.
Yeah. So tell us about the one then that you've geared towards.
So the Brood Brother Auxilia, the BBA, if you will, is representative of the Hive Cult, I think, and it is your kind of Astra Militarum regiment and flavour of the Genestealer Cults. Now, their detachment rule is integrated tactics, and effectively your Astra Militarum units buff your Genestealer Cult units. So each time an Astra Militarum unit from your army is chosen to shoot, you select an enemy unit within 18 inches. You can only shoot that unit with your Astra Militarum unit, and your Genestealer Cult units from the rest of your army get +1 to hit.
That's good. Kind of like
ranged attacks only.
Tau Markalites.
Yeah, kind of like mini Markalites, Genestealer Markalites.
Do you know what's missing from this book that I think is a shame? And just 10th edition Genestealer Cult in general. Do you remember the crossfire rule from 9th edition?
I do. I remember it being a bit complicated.
You basically had to flank the target, and if you could like draw a straight line from one shooting unit to another, then you'd get buffs to AP and stuff. So
yeah,
you had to be really close.
I think it's a cool mechanic, like a cool thematic mechanic, but also like not in 40k. Like, just that level of genuinely, I think it's too much. I think it's that level of kind of faffing and geometry. Like no, just say like if 2 units like Markalites, 1 unit can opt to not shoot and the other gets a bonus or whatever.
Yeah, so that's what I like about this Brood Brothers detachment is it has a bit of that. I like those kind of overlapping buffs that one type of unit can give. And I love the Tau Markalite rule, and I'm really happy that they've put something like that in with the Brood Brothers, and it makes sense to me as well. It's the guys with the big guns, the suppression experts are helping the slightly less well trained militias in the army to perform better. I think that's a cool narrative in my head. I can see that happening on the battlefield,
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't necessarily leaned into it super loads because you need to be within 18 inches, and we'll talk about my army composition in a minute. Okay. I think there's a way to make it a bit better just by taking more Astra Militarum infantry, but watch the space. So the best bit about this detachment, and the reason you're taking this detachment, isn't because of that detachment rule, or the only way that detachment rule would be relevant would be to include Astra Militarum units, surely. So you can, Brood Brothers rule, you can include Astra Militarum units in your army, even though they do not have the Genestealer Cults faction keyword, effectively up to half the cost of your army list. So a strike force up to 1,000 points. So it can't be the Warlord, and they lose the voice of the command, and you can't include aircraft, commissars, epic heroes, Militarum Tempestus, Ogrin, Rattling, Tech Priest Engineers, Ministorum Priests.
So the incorruptible commissars will never fall to the cult.
No, but we have our commissar equivalents in the form of Clamavus and Nexus,
absolutely,
and Benefactuses. Yeah. Right. Okay. So 1,000 points. What do you do with 1,000 points? Now that gives you a huge amount of flexibility, and I think every army will have a slightly different 1,000 points, and it will all be picking kind of, I suppose, like the gaps of your Genestealer Cult army. The 1,000 points of Genestealers you take will inform your 1,000 points of Astra Militarum, or vice versa. Yeah, I think it's good to kind of, if you're building the list to be good on the tabletop, I think it's something you can kind of decide as you build it. You can kind of do a very kind of meticulous planning. Whereas for me, I just went with, again, theme. So listeners may remember in the last episode for the Chaos Space Marine Codex, I had a kind of Renegade Guard themed list. And I just thought I could use the Codex to write almost the same list. Almost the same list.
It works very similarly, doesn't it?
It does. So honestly, the how close this list is to my chaos list is really quite scary / impressive. So I took two predator structures, 2 predator annihilators, and 2 vindicators. So I therefore swapped those for Leman Russes. And do you remember us talking about potentially running them as Leman Russ? Models.
Yeah.
I took 6 Leman Russ. So the vindicators are demolishers. And the destructors and annihilators are vanquishers and punishers. And you can kind of have a play around with the variants of Leman Russ, but that is 990 points.
I was going to say 1,000 points is a lot of guard, isn't it?
1,000 points is a lot of guard, and I think
Yeah.
there are better ways to do it, or the more efficient ways to do it. I just took 6 tanks because I had 6 tanks in my last list.
And to be fair, it is something that the Genestealer Cult Codex lacks. Is tough.
Yeah, they don't really have heavy armor, do they?
No, anti-tank stuff. They don't have a lot of that. They've got buggies with mining lasers on and that kind of stuff, but nothing that will take some hits. So that's a good way of using your guard allocation, I guess, is to really kind of plug a gap.
Yeah, and you can go tanks or you can go artillery.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be interested to know that 3 Death Strikes and 3 Manticores are unfortunately 1,050 points.
That's a shame. Who knows? Maybe with the guard codex, one or more will go down.
If you swapped those Death Strikes to Basilisks, no, if you swapped the Manticores to Basilisks, rather, doing a bit of live maths, 930 points.
Oh, there you go then. Stick a shock trooper squad in there and you're done.
Oh, so good. So good. Yeah, 930 points. So yeah, you can put some Krieg in there or some shock troops. Or indeed some Catachan jungle fighters. But yeah, there you go, artillery. So 6 tanks for 6 tanks. I then replaced I had 2 units of 10 Felgor Beastmen. I replaced them with a squad of 10 Pure Strain Genestealers.
Okay.
I then had a bunch of cultists. I had, I think, like 2 units of 10 guardsmen and 2 units of 20 cultists. I just replaced those with 4 units of 10 neophyte hybrids.
For the reasons that we spoke about earlier.
4 units of 10, yeah absolutely.
Yeah.
And then listeners may remember that I had a couple of traitor enforcers and a dark commune and a cultist firebrand kind of like leading the squads. So I popped in a Clamavus, a Nexus, and a Benefactus because they I thought they fit the theme.
Mm-hmm.
And the Benefactus is the new psychic one. I
was going to say that's the new model.
With her.
Yeah,
she's a really cool model. The Nexus and the Clamavus, I thought I wouldn't necessarily have to do a huge amount of conversion. They're like the strategy planners ones and the kind of comms guys. And then I replaced my accursed cultists which was 10 mutants and 6 torments with 10 aberrants.
And
the Dark Apostle was replaced by a Patriarch, and that's 1980.
There we go.
So I could add that with an Adaptive Reprisal, which allows me to do Heroic Intervention for 0 CP. Or
20 points is great enhancement time.
Oh, for sure,
isn't
for
it?
sure.
Yeah.
5-point Commander is the 20-point one, which is Overwatch hits on a 5-up. But this is Genestealer Cults infantry, not Astra Militarum. Not that I've got Astra Militarum infantry in it. And then the hero returned, improved the leadership and objective characteristics of models in the bearers unit by 1. I'm not certain that's
that's probably not one you'd take, is it? Nah.
But yeah, either of the first 2 would work. But there you go. That's 1980 points plus an enhancement, and it is almost kind of like for like swap with that chaos.
Yeah.
I just think that's really cool. I think that's a really cool way to
fun. It's fun. Corrupted Guard in any flavor is always going to be a intriguing army to run, isn't it? So the list doesn't lean into the detachment rule so much.
It doesn't, because I need to be within 18 inches, and the tanks aren't going to be within 18 inches. But
I don't know. I mean, they're tough enough to get up there, aren't they? I don't see why not.
I mean, the Demolishers are relatively close range.
Well, absolutely, yeah, like 24, I think. So yeah, definitely getting in there. And vehicles getting tagged in combat isn't the be all and end all anymore. Like, it doesn't stop you shooting. So that's, you can be a bit more aggressive, I've found, with your vehicles. And, with the tank shock stratagem as well, sometimes you want to charge your tank in because it's perfectly good at like cleaning up those units. So
to be honest, Punisher 24 inches as well. Punisher Gatling cannon. So actually,
hey, mate, you're in there.
yeah. I thought there was a lot longer. I thought it was 36 for some reason. Yeah, like that is no. So I counteract that. I don't think it isn't leading into the integrated tactics rule. I think I'm only 6 inches off.
So you don't have loads of Genestealer Cults shooting to necessarily like.
Yeah, I suppose that's the real thing. But like, what Genestealer Cult shooting?
Exactly. I was going to say there's not that much, to be honest.
There's not a huge amount.
Yeah, but are there any stratagems that really kind of tickle your fancy with this one, or?
Yeah, so we've mentioned in the Shadow of Iron, which allows you to flick your cult ambush marker over to your Astra Militarum vehicle. Obviously, I've got 6, so I think that's good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
There's a regimental reinforcements, which allows you to do effectively get Cult Ambush on a 3-up.
Oh, that's nice. That's really good. And is that any? No, that's just Astra Militarum infantry that can affect, isn't it? So that's yeah. But I mean, you've got some in there, so.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I'm wrong there. So just after an Astra Militarum infantry regiment unit. Oh, cool. So that allows you to. So that isn't good for this army because I don't have any Astra Militarum infantry. I've just got neophyte hybrids.
Yeah.
But that allows you to give the Cult Ambush rule to infantry regiments. So your Katachans, your Kriegs. That is really interesting. I hadn't read that.
And quite a reliable one as well on a 3-up.
On a 3-up.
Yeah,
I just thought that was a way to give something a 3-up. I hadn't even realised that was Astra Militarum infantry. Good spot, Max.
Oh, here's a good one.
Go for it.
Suppress and overwhelm. So your shooting phase just after your Astra Militarum unit has shot, so your tanks count. The target is that unit. Select one enemy unit hit by one of those attacks. Until the end of a turn, it cannot be targeted with Overwatch stratagem. So you switch off Overwatch, and each time a Genestealer Cults unit from your army selects that unit as a target of a charge, you can reroll the charge roll.
So good. Honestly, your tanks, that's my 10 aberrants and my pure stain Genestealers.
Exactly.
So good. Yeah. So good.
That might be my favourite one in this detachment, I think.
That's why I took those kind of big combat units, the 10 Genestealers and 10 aberrants.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Acceptable losses is fun.
Yeah, acceptable losses, yeah.
It means that you can shoot into combat if one of your infantry units is in engagement range, but there is the possibility of doing mortal wounds to them. So, it's like the tank commander's like, they're just some gribbly cultists, who cares? Like, shoot anyway. So that's a nice one to turn off.
I love it. Can you just imagine like a demolisher cannon just going off in a... Yes. You're like, oh, great, I've got 3 dudes, 3 neophytes in a combat, don't care, just going to demolish a cannon them. It's only 1d6 per unit, and on a 5-up, I will take those odds.
Oh yeah, especially on like a group of hybrids, and who cares? I'll bring them back. Yeah, very good.
What I think would be really interesting is not putting sponsons on your tanks and having like neophytes like on the back,
like hanging off the edges,
hanging off like with heavy weapons, like firing from the back. That would be really cool.
Oh, that would look awesome. Yeah, that would look so good.
So I think that's a really interesting list. I would genuinely like to play that, and I think it's not a huge... If I'm going to build that army, I'm building this heresy army with my kind of cult militia, so I'm going to have, and especially if I'm building heresy Leman Russ, which don't have sponsons, I can just like magnetize some Genestealer Cults onto the side. Job done.
I'm more excited about your list than mine.
Oh, well, there we go. I'll let you borrow it. Or I'll kill, or I'll destroy you with it, and you can experience the list as an opponent.
Yeah. Okay. So overall, kind of closing thoughts on this book. Where do we put it? What do you think?
So I don't think this is going to be the best book ever competitively.
No.
Just because I think it's quite complex. I think it's quite a thinking player's army.
Yeah. There are some amazing players out there. I'm sure they will find something to give this thing some teeth, but for someone like me, it doesn't jump out at me where the power is in this book.
I think the power, weirdly, is in Outlander Claw.
Okay, one that neither of us particularly like.
For sure. But I mean, no, the one that neither of us picked to do the army with.
Yes,
I think because we're going for theme, right? We're going for But it's all fast moving units, or it's buffing in fast moving units.
Yeah.
It allows you to give them sticky objectives. It allows you, the stratagems are kind of movement and survivability and shenanigans. I think that is probably like the best detachment.
Yeah. And we've got new mission deck coming as well. So
for sure, for the Pariah Nexus.
Exactly. Who knows? Who knows how what's worked for the original mission deck might not work so well in the new books, in the new missions. So yeah, interesting. But I'd agree with that comment from you that it's probably not the most obviously competitive book. I think some of the stratagems are really inventive, really good fun. For me, I feel like the detachments pigeonhole me a bit too much, but I'm not unhappy with the book. I think overall it's a good addition. I think Genestealer Cult players will be pleased with it.
Yeah, I think Genestealer Cult players will be pleased with it, and I think other players will be interested in it. I think hobbyists will be really excited by it, and Astra Militarum players, if you've got an Astra Militarum army, you've effectively just got a new book.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, because you can take whatever your Astra Militarum army is, and just add 1,000 points of Genestealers. That is that's like a Patriarch and 3 to 10 aberrants.
Yeah, it's not far off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that's the best thing.
What you would take,
but you know,
it's worth
whatever.
it just for that stratagem. My God, I love that stratagem.
For
That's
sure.
my favorite strat in the book. That one for sure.
What, suppress and overwhelm?
Yeah, it's so good.
How's this for an army max? 6 Leman Russ.
Okay.
Patriarch, 30 aberrants. Oh, what larks.
Brilliant.
Right. So, team, let us know what you think of the book. Let us know what detachment you're most interested in exploring based off our episode and what Warhammer community's shared with the community so far. And yeah, let us know what you're excited about and potentially what you think you would have liked to have seen in the book instead. And it's always interesting what's left out as much as what's included. And until next time, keep calm and crusade on.